I'm back here with musician James Walton Ingham. James, thank you for coming into the show today.
Yep, thanks very much for having me here.
Your first piece was just beautiful. So tell us, what influences your music?
I think Elvis, the Beatles and stuff when I was young. There was a record collection next door where my aunt used to live and she'd left home, and there were loads of Beatles albums there. So I spent the afternoons just flipping through them and listening. But I think just living in London, there was so much going on. I was lucky enough to catch the tail end of the 1960s folk boom in London.
Right.
A lot of those guys were still around. People like Davy Graham used to go and support him, and that was wonderful. Also the African community.
You, of course, you live in London, and London's multicultural.
Yeah.
How important is that in terms of world music, and how important is that in terms of how music has an impact in the world?
Well, I think I would always just write about where I came from, but it's very obvious listening to a lot of the songs that I wrote years ago. I remember getting a song of mine critiqued by a professional musician. Adrian Borland sat down and listened to some of my stuff one night, and he loved the fact there was this one song, and I'd found a thumb piano in the market which came from Zimbabwe. I had a kora which someone had lent me that came from Gambia. I had my guitar in a particular African tuning that Ali Farka Touré had showed me, and I'd written a song about a girl who lived around the corner. And I think that he was impressed by the fact that although I was in love with all this music and with the girl and stuff, that I'd brought it all together, and it was just one song. I wasn't writing about toiling in the fields or pretending to be an African farmer or anything like that. I was just writing about what I was going through, but it just sounded...
Well, it's coming from your heart, isn't it?
It came from the heart, and also the music came from the heart. I don't know why, but when I first heard palm wine guitar music, it sent shivers. It was a bit like they say, when a Scotsman hears the bagpipes, something happens to him in here. Yeah.
Is that the technique you're just talking about? But palm wine,
palm wine music comes from the West Coast. It's it's very cheap alcohol, palm wine, because a bottle of Guinness in the 1940s, I'm told, he used to tell me, Roger used to say, it would cost a week's wages just to get imported Guinness. So they'd send someone up the palm tree of a night, and you tap the palm tree, you get the sap. The juice comes out, you collect it in a pot, you take it down, you can give it to children. It's full of yeast and nutrients. It's actually quite a good, healthy drink. Right. But you leave it, and it gets quite pokey, ferments, and then re-ferments, and eventually it's rocket fuel, and that's where the music comes from, because that's what all the musicians used to play, and they'd sit up all night. Interesting. He used to hear them walking past. He was working as a tailor, I think, as a young man. And it was 3 in the morning, and he just heard these people all in harmony, bit tipsy, walking up the road with their guitars, playing this music, and he said he thought he'd died and gone to heaven. It's the most beautiful sound.
Interesting, yes. It's strong stuff then.
Yeah, it's very simple. I
mean, the music.
But the music's simple, the drink, very cheap, easy to get hold of. The best things in life are free, aren't they?
Great stuff, No, it's fantastic. And I mean, we haven't got much time, of course, because we want to hear other music and so on, but tell us a bit more about Sierra Leone, because that's a great big theme in terms of, your influences.
Well, I mean,
person that
music,
you're talking about.
He was the greatest palm wine guitar player that ever lived, and I mean, there are young kids like Vampire Weekend who name check him. They love his music, and he'd have loved that, and hats off to them for doing that. But palm wine music comes from all to the West Coast. He just came from Sierra Leone, and it was war-torn. He had to leave. And I think he was heartbroken. He died in '94, and he'd gone back in the early '90s just to go home and check it out again, because he hadn't been back for 25 years, and he was very upset to see what was happening there at the time. Yeah.